These whispered lessons shown on this channel. If I had known,
If I had known before falling in love.
if I had known. Welcome to the
If I had known what love truly requires, I would have entered it with more understanding instead of just emotion. At the beginning, everything felt perfect, almost too perfect to question. The connection was instant, as if two lives that had been moving separately suddenly found a shared rhythm. Conversations flowed without effort, laughter came easily, and silence itself felt comfortable. Every moment carried a sense of meaning, and every small gesture seemed to confirm that something rare and beautiful had been found. In those early days, love felt like certainty. It felt like arrival, like reaching a destination I did not even know I had been searching for. I believed that feeling alone was enough. I believed that the strength of our emotions would carry us through anything. I did not stop to ask deeper questions, because I did not want anything to disturb the beauty of what I was experiencing. Love, at that stage, felt like happiness in its purest form. It felt like being understood without having to explain yourself. It felt like being seen, truly seen, in a way that made you feel valued and important. I held on to that feeling tightly, convinced that it was enough to build a future. I thought that as long as we cared for each other, everything else would naturally fall into place. But time has a way of revealing what emotions try to hide. Slowly, almost unnoticed at first, things began to shift. The same conversations that once felt effortless started to require more effort. Differences that seemed small at the beginning began to grow in significance. We started to see situations differently, react differently, and prioritize different things. What once felt like harmony began to feel like tension. I began to notice patterns I had ignored before. The way we handled challenges was not the same.
lessons shown on this channel.
When conflict arose, I wanted to talk, to understand, to resolve. But the response I received was often silence, avoidance, or defensiveness. At first, I told myself it was normal. Every relationship has struggles. But deep inside, I knew something was not right. Small disagreements became more frequent, and they no longer felt small. The things I had once overlooked, habits, attitudes, ways of thinking, started to matter more than I expected. I realized that what I had dismissed as minor differences were actually reflections of deeper misalignment. And yet I stayed. I stayed because I remembered how it felt in the beginning. I stayed because I believed that if we tried harder, we could return to that place. I stayed because I was afraid to lose what I thought was special. But in doing so, I ignored the growing distance between what I hoped for and what was real. It was only later that I understood a difficult truth. I had fallen in love with the feeling, not the reality. I had fallen in love with how the relationship made me feel happy, valued, alive, but I had not taken enough time to understand whether the foundation beneath those feelings was strong enough to last. I had focused on emotions instead of asking deeper questions about compatibility, character, and purpose. I had chosen hope over clarity. I wanted the relationship to work so badly that I ignored the signs that it might not be right. I convinced myself that love meant endurance, that staying no matter what was a sign of strength. But I did not realize that sometimes, staying in the wrong place requires more denial than courage. The truth is, love is not just about emotions. Emotions are powerful, but they are also unpredictable. They can rise quickly, and they can fade just as easily. Real love requires more than how you feel in the moment. It requires understanding, patience, and alignment. It requires two people who are not only attracted to each other, but who also share similar values, similar visions, and a willingness to grow together.
If I had known.
Without these, feelings alone cannot sustain a relationship. They may start it, but they cannot carry it. The pain came when I could no longer ignore this reality. What once brought joy began to bring confusion. What once felt natural began to feel forced. I found myself questioning things I had once been certain about. I began to feel a quiet disappointment, not just in the relationship, but in myself for not seeing things clearly from the beginning. Letting go was not easy. In fact, it was one of the hardest things I had ever done. Because letting go did not just mean losing a person. It meant letting go of the future I had imagined, the memories I cherished, and the version of myself that believed everything would work out. But staying would have been even harder. Staying would have meant continuing to ignore the truth. It would have meant sacrificing my peace for the sake of familiarity. It would have meant holding on to something that was no longer growing, no longer healthy, no longer aligned with who I was becoming. In that moment of decision, I understood something important. Love is not just about finding someone who makes you happy. It is about finding someone who walks with you in the same direction. It is about shared values. It is about mutual respect. It is about a foundation that goes beyond feelings, one that can withstand challenges, disagreements, and the passage of time. It is about choosing each other not just in moments of joy, but also in moments of difficulty. From a deeper perspective, I began to see love differently. Love should not just be driven by desire or attraction. It should be guided by wisdom. It should be rooted in purpose. It should reflect not only what we want, but also what we need for growth, stability, and peace.
Welcome to the space. Stories whispered, lessons shown.
If I had taken time to seek understanding instead of rushing into emotions, I could have avoided much of the pain. If I had asked more questions about values, about goals, about how we each see life, I might have seen the differences earlier. If I had paid attention to actions instead of just words, I might have understood more clearly who we really were. But I did not know then what I know now. If I had known, I would have been more patient. I would not have rushed to define something before truly understanding it. I would have allowed time to reveal what emotions often hide. I would have listened not only to my heart, but also to wisdom, to experience, and to the quiet voice within that often sees what we try to ignore. I would have understood that love is not proven by how quickly it begins, but by how steadily it grows. I would have known that true connection is not just about chemistry, but about compatibility. Not just about passion, but about purpose. Now, I carry the lessons. I understand that love is powerful, but it must be approached with clarity. I understand that feelings are important, but they are not enough on their own. I understand that choosing the right person requires more than emotion. It requires discernment. And perhaps most importantly, I understand that not every love is meant to last, but every experience has something to teach. Because when love is built on the wrong foundation, it does not just end, it leaves lessons behind. Lessons about who we are, what we value, and what we truly need. Lessons that are often learned the hard way, but that shape us into wiser, stronger, and more aware individuals.
Welcome to the space. Stories whispered, lessons shown.
If I had known, I would have chosen differently. But maybe the purpose of not knowing was to learn. Maybe the experience itself was necessary, to open my eyes, to challenge my understanding, and to prepare me for something better in the future. Maybe the pain was not just an ending, but also a beginning of clarity, growth, and deeper awareness. And maybe someone hearing this will pause. Maybe they will take time to understand before they give their heart away. Maybe they will ask questions, observe carefully, and look beyond emotions. Maybe they will choose not just based on how they feel, but also on what they see and what they know. Because love is too important to be entered blindly. If I had known, I would have done things differently. But now that I know, I will never love the same way again. Thank you for choosing If I Had Known YouTube channel, where you find the life-changing stories. Stay tuned in and never miss the next episode.